When you call emergency services, you expect an immediate, almost chaotic rush, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Sirens blaring, lights flashing, adrenaline pumping. The protocol is speed because every single second counts.
Right, because we are fundamentally wired to equate urgency with care.
Exactly. I mean, if you are in a crisis, a delay is essentially viewed as negligence or, maybe even abandonment.
Yeah, in any medical emergency, there is this concept of the golden hour. It's that window of time where immediate intervention makes the absolute difference between life and death.
Right.
And missing that window, well, it goes against every instinct we have as humans trying to preserve life.
It really does. But today, we are going to look at an emergency response that completely shatters that logic. So welcome to today's deep dive.
Glad to be diving into this one.
Whether you are catching up on biblical history, prepping for a theological discussion, or, you're just wildly curious about how ancient texts still challenge our modern assumptions, we have custom-tailored this exploration for you.
We've got a really fascinating stack of sources in front of us today, too.
Oh, yeah. Heavy theological commentaries, deep historical analyses of first-century Judea, and some very poignant pastoral reflections. And all of them are centered on what is arguably one of the most famous miracles in the Bible, which is John chapter 11, the raising of Lazarus.
It is a story so embedded in the cultural consciousness that it almost suffers from its own popularity.
Totally.
People think they know the outline. Right. A man dies, his sisters mourn, Jesus shows up and brings him back from the dead. It just gets treated like a straightforward magical event.
Yeah, but our mission today is to tear down that simple Sunday school summary. We're going to extract the hidden historical context and untangle some truly baffling timeline mysteries that most people just read right past.
There's so much more going on under the surface.
Right. We're also going to look at a surprising Greek translation of human emotion that completely changes how we view the divine and uncover the profound theological aha moments that make this text, infinitely more complex than it appears on the surface.
To really grasp the gravity of what happens here, we need to properly set the stage. We are looking at the climax of what biblical scholars call the book of signs in the Gospel of John.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So, Jesus receives an urgent, desperate message from Mary and Martha. Their brother, his close friend Lazarus, is gravely ill in a town called Bethany. Jesus is holding the ultimate power to heal, but instead of rushing to his friend's side...
Instead of turning on the sirens.
Exactly. Instead of turning on the sirens, Jesus stays exactly where he is for 2 entire days.
And before we even get to the miracle itself, I was looking through the historical commentary in our stack, and there is a weird geographical problem that makes this whole timeline incredibly confusing.
The 2 Bethanys.
Yes. The sources point out that there are actually 2 Bethanys mentioned in the Gospel of John.
Right. You have the primary Bethany, the village where Mary, Martha, and Lazarus live. That sits on the eastern slope of the Mount of Olives, just about 2 miles outside of Jerusalem.
Okay, pretty close.
But earlier in the narrative, Jesus had faced intense hostility from the religious leaders in Jerusalem. They actually tried to stone him, so he withdrew to a safer region. He fled across the Jordan River to the place where John the Baptist had originally been baptizing.
And in John chapter 1, that specific location is also referred to as Bethany, Bethany across the Jordan.
Right.
So Jesus is at one Bethany, and the emergency is at the other Bethany. How far apart are we actually talking about here?
Well, this sparks a massive debate among historians and theologians. One leading theory, which is supported by prominent scholars like D.A. Carson, suggests this second Bethany was located up in a region called Betania in the northeast.
Okay, and how far is that?
If that geography is correct, Jesus was nearly 100 miles away. In the ancient world, traveling on foot through rugged terrain, 100 miles is a solid 4-day journey.
Wait, 100 miles?
Yeah.
If he's a 4-day walk away and someone is actively dying, why would they even send a runner? By the time the runner gets there, it's over. But I saw in the notes there's another option for this location.
Right. Other historical geographers argue for a location called Bethabara, which sits just north of the Dead Sea. That is only about 20 miles away from Jerusalem.
Oh, okay. That's way closer.
It is. That would make it a relatively manageable 1-day journey. But let's look at the actual math of the narrative, because regardless of which geographical theory you adopt, the chronology reveals a startling, almost uncomfortable fact.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's run the numbers on both theories.
If Jesus is in Bethania, a 4-day journey away, the messenger takes 4 days to reach him. The moment the messenger arrives, Lazarus has likely already been dead for days.
Wow.
If Jesus is in Bethabara, only a one-day journey away, the messenger takes 1 day. Jesus waits 2 days, then travels 1 day. That equals 4 days. When Jesus finally arrives at the tomb in Judea, the text explicitly states Lazarus has been dead for 4 days.
So if you factor in the 2 days Jesus intentionally delayed, plus the travel time, Lazarus was taking his final breaths, or already deceased by the time the messenger even found Jesus.
Yes. The timeline mathematically proves that Jesus' delay wasn't what cost Lazarus his life. The golden hour had already passed.
I gotta say, I am struggling with the emotional reality of that. If Jesus knew his friend was already gone, or knew that the distance made it physically impossible to get there in time, why did he intentionally wait 2 more days before leaving?
It's a tough question.
He could have just left immediately to go comfort the sisters. Sitting there for 48 hours feels cold. It feels almost cruel to Mary and Martha, who are sitting in the epicenter of this grief, wondering where he is.
Well, we connect this to the bigger picture. Jesus was engineering a very specific set of circumstances. It wasn't negligence, and it certainly wasn't cruelty.
Then what was it?
The delay was a highly deliberate, calculated choice to ensure that the miracle he was planning would be absolutely undeniable to the specific culture watching it happen. He needed to hit a very specific marker. 4 days in the grave.
Okay, that brings us to a massive cultural difference between their world and ours. Why is the number 4 the magic number in this story? What changes between day 3 and day 4?
We have to view death through the lens of first-century Judea. The sources highlight an extra-biblical Jewish tradition found in the Talmud. There was a prevalent, popular belief regarding the state of the human soul immediately following death.
Okay.
It was commonly thought that for 3 days the soul hovered around the deceased body, hoping to find a way to re-enter it.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because the culture actually believed the soul was just like lingering in the room. And they thought as long as it had only been a day or two, maybe the person was just hovering on the edge waiting for a chance to slip back in.
Exactly. But on the 4th day, biological reality irrevocably sets in. The climate in the Middle East is unforgiving. After 3 days in a tomb, severe decomposition begins. The body's appearance drastically changes.
Right.
By the 4th day, the cultural belief was that the soul saw the decay, realized the body was no longer habitable, and departed forever. When Jesus finally asks the crowd to roll the stone away, Martha, the grieving sister, famously objects. She warns him, "Lord, already there is a stench."
That detail is so visceral. It's not a sanitized funeral parlor. It is raw biological death.
The 4th day was the undisputed point of no return. Death was absolute. Any hope of resuscitation or the soul miraculously re-entering was completely gone in the minds of everyone present.
It's like a modern doctor standing over a patient who has flatlined. The doctor waits for the heart monitor to stop, waits for all brain activity to completely cease, and then decides to sit in the waiting room for another 12 hours.
That's a great way to picture it.
Why do that? You do it so that when the patient finally wakes up, absolutely no skeptic in the hospital can look at the chart and say, oh, his pulse was just really faint. Or she was just in a deep coma.
Yeah.
Jesus waited for the 4th day to strip away every possible naturalistic explanation.
Let's take that analogy a step further.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about proving the critics wrong. It was about demonstrating the full scope of his identity. Jesus was stepping into the most entrenched, terrifying boundary of human existence and proving he had divine authority over it.
Wow.
By allowing Lazarus to cross that cultural threshold of absolute death, he was removing any shadow of a doubt that he was the author of life itself.
So we have established that Jesus was in complete control of this timeline. He knew Lazarus was dead. He knew the cultural significance of the 4 days. He intentionally waited, and he knew exactly what he was going to do the moment he walked up to that tomb.
Right.
Which makes his emotional reaction when he finally arrived incredibly confusing.
This is where we encounter the shortest and perhaps most misunderstood verse in the Bible.
John 11.35. It is just 2 words in English. Jesus wept. It is a famous trivia answer, but if you actually look at the structure of the narrative, it feels like a massive contradiction.
It really does.
If he is fully in control of the situation, and he knows he is literally seconds away from bringing his best friend back to life, why is he crying? I've always heard it was just out of sympathy. You know, he sees Mary crying, so he cries with her.
He is certainly mourning with those who mourn, offering deep pastoral comfort. But the theological commentaries in our stack reveal a much deeper, more complex linguistic layer that English translations often obscure.
Oh, interesting.
We have to look back 2 verses to John 11.33. It describes Jesus seeing Mary weeping and the Jews who had come with her weeping, and it says he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled.
That phrase, deeply moved, sounds very gentle to me. It sounds like someone getting choked up at a sad movie.
The Greek word used there is embryomai. In classical Greek literature, outside the New Testament, this word is used to describe the snorting of horses as they prepare for battle.
Wait, snorting horses?
Yeah, it conveys a visceral, guttural indignation. It implies a profound outrage or anger. Some scholars translate it as being furious or groaning with a deep physical anguish.
I'm trying to picture that. He isn't just shedding a quiet, dignified tear. He is physically shaking with anger. He's furious. But again, why? If he holds the keys to fix the problem, who is he mad at? It makes me think of a parent watching their child completely melt down over a shattered toy.
Okay, I like that.
The parent has a tube of superglue right there in their pocket. They know they can fix the toy in 5 seconds and make everything perfect again. But seeing their child in that kind of agonizing distress, the parent still feels a flash of real anger that the child has to experience the pain of loss at all.
That is a perfect analogy. The theological implications of that anger are immense. Jesus isn't just sad that his friend is dead. He is furious at the concept of death itself.
He hates it.
Exactly. The sources suggest he is looking at the devastation around him, the wailing sisters, the professional mourners, the tomb, and he is outraged by the unnatural effects of sin and the profound pain it inflicts on humanity. Death was never part of the original design. He's raging against the enemy of human flourishing.
It fundamentally rewrites the picture of a stoic, detached deity. He isn't hovering above the messy reality of the world, offering distant platitudes about how everything happens for a reason. Not at all.
Even when he literally holds the solution in his hand, he wades right into the blast radius of human grief. He experiences the outrage with us.
And that intense, visceral reaction to the reality of death leads directly into his profound, defining conversation with Martha. This exchange isn't just about comforting a grieving sister. It is about completely redefining the nature of life itself.
Right, because when Jesus finally gets near the village, Martha runs out to meet him on the road. She is raw, she's honest, and she says what everyone is thinking. Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died.
Very natural human response.
Yeah, and Jesus looks at her and says, your brother will rise again. And Martha gives what is basically the gold standard Orthodox Sunday school answer of first-century Judaism. She says, I know he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day.
Right.
She pushes the power of God out into a distant, theoretical future.
She relegated the ultimate triumph over death to an event on a calendar at the end of history. Notice how Jesus pivots? He responds with one of the most powerful I am statements in the text.
What does he say? He says, I am the resurrection and the life. The one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die.
Wow. He takes that abstract future hope and pulls it violently into the present reality. He's saying, you are looking for an event, but you should be looking at a person.
Exactly. And one of our sources, a pastoral reflection from Providence Presbyterian, uses a striking medical concept to illustrate the danger of Martha's mindset. They warn against treating this theology as mere palliative care.
Palliative care, meaning medical treatment that is only designed to make you comfortable while you are dying, but doesn't actually attempt to cure the underlying disease.
Yes, exactly. Treating the promise of resurrection as palliative care means you only use it as a comforting thought to hold on to as you inch toward the afterlife. It becomes a coping mechanism for the misery of the present.
Just managing symptoms.
Right. And Jesus completely rejects that framing. He is stating that resurrection isn't just what happens to you after you flatline. It is a power that is supposed to invade your current daily existence.
So what does this actually mean for you and me? When I look at Martha's view, it is like discovering you have a massive, multi-million-dollar trust fund, but you continue to live in absolute grinding poverty because you mistakenly believe you aren't allowed to touch a single penny of that money until you turn 80 years old.
That's spot on.
The sources are emphasizing that this resurrection power isn't just fire insurance for the afterlife. It is meant to animate a vibrant, victorious, courageous life prior to death.
Life after death is promised, absolutely.
Yeah.
But life before death, is what Jesus is injecting into the present moment.
Yeah.
And he doesn't just make this towering philosophical claim, he physically proves it.
Yeah, he
He
does.
walks up to the tomb of a man who has been decomposing for 4 days. The heavy stone is rolled away. The stench of death fills the air. And Jesus shouts into the pitch black of the cave, "Lazarus, come out!"
It has to be one of the most dramatic, cinematic moments in all of ancient literature. I mean, the dead man literally stumbles out into the sunlight, still completely bound up in his linen burial shrouds.
It's an unbelievable scene.
Jesus just looks at the dumbfounded crowd and tells them to take off the grave clothes and let him go. But this incredible miracle, this ultimate act of healing, carries an incredibly ironic and deadly sociopolitical consequence.
What's fascinating here is the contrast we need to draw between the resurrection of Lazarus and the impending resurrection of Jesus himself. It is a critical theological nuance that the commentaries spend a lot of time unpacking.
Wait, how are they different? Didn't they both just beat death?
They did, but our sources point out that Lazarus was raised to a mortal life. He was given his biological life back, which means his cells would continue to age.
Oh, right.
He would eventually grow old, get sick, and have to die all over again. Lazarus' return simply prefigured or served as a preview for Jesus' resurrection.
Got it.
When Jesus later rises from the dead, it is to an eternal glorified state, never to die again. Lazarus was a resuscitation to mortality. Jesus was a resurrection to eternity.
But the immediate aftermath of Lazarus walking out of that tomb is shocking to me. You would think the entire country would throw a massive parade. A man just conquered death in broad daylight. But instead of universally celebrating, the Jewish religious leaders in Jerusalem absolutely panic. Why is a healing a threat to them?
We have to understand the delicate socio-political dynamics of first-century Judea. The Jewish High Council, the Sanhedrin, operated under the crushing thumb of the Roman Empire.
Right.
The Pax Romana, the peace of Rome, was maintained by brutal force. The religious leaders were terrified that a messianic figure performing undeniable, massively public signs like this would draw an uncontrollable crowd.
Because crowds lead to trouble.
Exactly. If a popular uprising started, the Roman garrison stationed at the Antonia fortress overlooking the temple would view it as a political rebellion. Rome would march in, slaughter the crowds, and strip the Sanhedrin of whatever fragile power and autonomy they had left.
And this leads to one of the darkest ironies in the entire biblical text. The high priest, a man named Caiaphas, calls an emergency meeting of the council. He stands up and unwittingly delivers a prophecy.
Yeah, this part is wild.
He tells the room, "You know nothing at all. You do not realize that it is better for you that one man die for the people than that the whole nation perish."
Caiaphas meant it purely as a cold, ruthless political calculation. Let's assassinate this rogue rabbi to save our own positions and appease the Roman overlords.
Right.
But as the author of the Gospel notes, Caiaphas was actually prophesying the core of the entire Christian message, that Jesus would lay down his life as a substitute for the people.
They immediately begin plotting to kill Jesus, and eventually they plot to kill Lazarus too, just to destroy the walking, breathing evidence of the miracle.
Yeah, they wanted him gone too.
It is staggering to realize that by giving his best friend his life back, Jesus actively signs his own death warrant. The Good Shepherd literally lays down his life for the sheep. He knew that calling Lazarus out of the tomb was going to put him on the cross.
It is the ultimate cosmic exchange. He willingly walks into the epicenter of death to pull his friend out, fully aware of the violent chain reaction it will cause.
The intellectual and emotional shift in this story is just incredible. We didn't just walk through a Sunday school summary today. We unpacked the reality of a God who intentionally delays, not out of cruelty, but to prove absolute sovereignty over the biological finality of a 4-day grave.
Absolutely.
We discovered a God who doesn't offer hollow platitudes, but violently snorts with outrage at the existence of human suffering, stepping right into the grief.
And we saw how he challenged the people around him to stop viewing resurrection as a distant, palliative comfort and start living in the present reality of his power.
Right.
And we watched how the ultimate act of divine healing inadvertently ignited the political powder keg that led to his crucifixion.
Before we close out, there is a final thought I want to leave you with, something to mull over as you go about your week. Think about Lazarus after the crowds went home. He lived the rest of his life as a man who had already been dead.
Imagine the psychological shift that must have occurred in him. How do you go back to haggling over the price of grain in the market? How do you interact with your neighbors or view your daily anxieties, knowing with absolute first-hand certainty what is on the other side of the veil?
You really can't.
The petty, material worries of the first-century world must have completely evaporated for him.
It makes you wonder how courageous he became.
And perhaps more profoundly, think about what happened years later. When it was finally time for Lazarus to reach the end of his natural mortal life, and his body began to fail, and he had to die a second time.
Oh, wow.
What must that have felt like? To close his eyes and walk back into the shadow, knowing the exact voice that called him out the first time was waiting for him on the other side.
That is a staggering thought. It completely reframes how we view the daily emergencies and delays in our own lives. When the sirens are blaring for you and you feel like the response is delayed or the golden hour has passed, maybe you just aren't seeing the full timeline.
There's always a bigger picture.
We all want the quick fix, the rushing ambulance, but sometimes the delay is setting the stage for something far more undeniable. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you walk away with a totally fresh perspective on this ancient text and maybe just a little less fear of the dark. We'll catch you next time.